Hey everyone. Today I want to talk about art fundamentals. When we're starting to learn everything in art, we get inundated with a lot of different names, concepts, as the ones you can see in the screen right now. Like you need to study your perspective, anatomy, and it can get really overwhelming really fast. Like I felt that all the students that I had conversations with felt that. I constantly have conversations with artists and I see that happening. I would love to hear your experiences as well. But today, I want to try and change it a little bit. I had the privilege and the opportunity to study under Joon Ahn recently on his flash course on Brainstorm School. And he was basically talking about design and his design process, design philosophy, concepts, and so on and so forth. Very interesting and important course for everyone that wants to create from imagination. He goes through all the steps, research, thinking outside of the box, and trying to get a unified, as you can see the name of the course, a unified result down the line, especially going through a lot of the things he did for Riot Games. But one of the things that he touches on in the beginning of the class, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this here, is something that I'm really passionate about. If you follow the channel long enough, you might have seen a video that I did on hacking your art education. And it has a lot to do with curriculum, how we learn art for different fields, for different uses down the line. And he uses a three-step or three-group process to define what art looks like and how to organize the fundamentals. So if we look at some of the details that he shared, so the logic part is everything that is math related, is visual related, that a camera can capture. So it's the form, it's the perspective drawing, how to create the illusion of three-dimensionality in the two dimensions of your page, of your computer screen, and so on. Lighting, a lot of rules of reflection, color of light, materials. Metals have different reflectivity and refraction, and so on and so forth. Then he goes more into the aesthetic side. So, what looks good? So, composition, value, colors. How can you manipulate what you've learned in the logic side? And so, you want to paint something that is very high key. So, you want to change the value structure and get more light into that. And the contrasts will change a lot, subtleties here and there, especially the medium that you are working with. You can really have your gamut maps if you've seen James Gurney's way of thinking color and so on. And the most important part that I see a lot of people not give the due importance, that is the creative aspect. This is where the careers are at. I have talked about this here on the channel as well. You are creating, you're designing something. It could be an architecture, it could be an object, a character, and so on. Or you're telling a story, or both altogether. You're creating a character to tell a story. It's part of a bigger story. So you're combining everything that you learned on the logic side and the aesthetic side into something that creates something new. You're using all of those tools. And even the courses that Joon has at Brainstorm, you can see that he organizes those in this way. So you have the more logic driven, so learning to render with light and so on. Then you have the fantasy landscape. I think he uses landscape as well to take out a lot of the story and focus on the aesthetics. You can see different ways, even on those images here, and you can go through his work. I'll have links in the description as well. Different ways of rendering, different ways of presenting this aesthetic. And finally, the design one that I went through that is taking more the creative side and the creative aspect and the flow and the process and so on. This reminded me of something very similar that I saw from the artist and instructor Sam Nielson back in the day. See, he has a little bit of a similar structure. So the structure part would be the form, perspective, anatomy, function, everything that is more logical, just as we've seen with Joon. He has also the technique side that could be seen. It could be software. It could be your draftsmanship, how easily you can make a line, how can you control the value pressure that you're painting with, or your media, if you're using watercolors, if you're using oils, and so on. And then you have the design aspect that I think it's a little bit of a combination of the aesthetic side from Joon and the creative side. So it's the composition and the color manipulation and all of that, but focusing on bringing that to a design and story element. Also, his courses are a little bit on that direction from schoolism. So you can see the fundamentals of lighting is very focused on the physics of light. So reflectivity, once again, different materials, light, local color, light color, how they interact, and so on. And then how to use that to tell a story and create concept art. This is the other course that he has there. And we're going to see other sources of knowledge later on. So what I would like to propose here today is a 4-part structure that combines a little bit of those two and creates almost like a linear view. We're going to see that the progress I want to suggest is more cyclical and revolves around the creative aspects. I'll get back to this, but this is what I'm talking about. So the creative in the middle and everything that you're learning around it, I'll get back to that. But this is a very linear kind of thinking as well, because you have a growing level of difficulty here. So learning to see that definitely the media and draftsmanship is something that you can develop your whole life, but seeing and some of the basic aspects of software, it's the first thing that you can go through. It's using your pencil, it's looking at the world and breaking down things. I'll talk more in detail later on, but is the first step. The second one is the more logic aspects. It's easier to understand some of those things because they have a little more of a formula, if we want to use that term. So it's the lightings that we talked about, but also like function. So how does an engine function on a car? If we are designing a car, you have a lot of that, or anything, like any object, architecture, construction, and all of that, and the human figure in the anatomy aspect. How do we function? And the movement aspect, also we have that side as very formulaic. Then it starts to get harder. So the aesthetic side, how can you manipulate all of that? The gesture part we haven't talked about, but is really all of that. How can you stretch things and distort things to really convey what's happening there and what you want to convey? And the principles of animation here. So scratch, stretch, all the anticipation. So you can use a lot of the motion to create a message. And finally, the creative aspects, I would love to include expression here, because you can have a whole career or a whole like journey as an artist, as a hobbyist artist, and focus on how you want to express yourself, how you want to express how you see the world. It's more of my side as well. I have worked as an illustrator, concept art in the past, but I understood that I'm not that much into telling stories and designing things. I'm more into artistically, into looking at the world and trying to change that a little bit to convey the beauty, how I'm seeing it, how I want to experience it, and the things I want to focus more and give more attention to, and so on. So I think that part is super important. And now we're going to go step by step into each one and give some examples here and there. So the technique side, I have talked extensively here in the channel. So starting with seeing and learning to see, I have talked about Patty Edwards, the Bargue method. It's learning to break down visually into negative spaces, proportions, angles, and so on. You have some examples here from the Bargue method as well as Betty Edwards, but you're starting to train your aesthetic as well. So as I mentioned in this video here, the Bargue is not only about learning to see, but absorbing the quality of aesthetic that the great masters had. This is where copying is really important. You are both learning to see, learning to control your media. So if it's a drawing in pencil, just like Iain McCaig's here, you're trying to control your materials. If you're trying to do a master copy on Sargent using oils here and controlling your values, it's going to be a full class in just one copy. You probably not learn how to choose, but you'll definitely learn your media and how to control colors, values, and so on. It's the same if you do a copy of Seurat. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'll have links down below, or at least the name, so you can search it out, trying to understand the colors in the shadow area from kind of this pointillism kind of way of painting. It's an interesting way to learn the colors and point them and the impacts that they have from a distance when you simplify or you squint your eyes. We can see a lot of the influence from this in some of Joon's work as well. So look that up. It's interesting to see. I've discussed also a lot of tools and process, softwares, 3D, and so on. You have Jesper Eising here talking about painting in acrylics. Craig Mullins, his use of software process inside Photoshop and so on. He almost invented the mixer brush and how that impacts the final result of his work. There's a lot of that, and a lot of artists are in the forefront of using new tools. We have AI coming up right now. Is it going to be a tool? This is another discussion. There's an awesome video by Feng Zhu that just popped. I'll have links to that. It's the Design Cinema 110. I think I have it here later on. We're going to touch on that. Jama with the use of 3D, as well as Anis Naim and his use of greasy pencil in Blender. If we go back here to the structure now, it's the most content that you find all over. I've talked about this in the books that actually the books that I go through in my video, they have a little bit of everything. If we look in here, we can see that it starts with scene, it goes into more logical structure part, it becomes getting more the plein air aesthetic side and a little bit of functionality and design ergonomics, telling stories and the figure from more structural as well as a gesture standpoint. So aesthetics here. Then it starts going into more aesthetics with composition, storytelling, and getting all the way to design and how to use it to the highest level. And then you understand how Richard Schmidt, Harold Speed, as well as Claire Wendling, and a lot of the artists out there, they combine all the knowledge of structure, aesthetic, and the use of the media they have to create something new. So there's a little bit of everything, but a big part of that is structure. So form, perspective, lighting, and so on. Dynamic sketching is basically form and perspective with a little bit of lighting. Here, the figure drawing, I went through a lot of different processes, as well as my videos on value and the color, as well as drawing for concept art. All like links, you can go through the channel as well and get that. Design Studio Press has great books on this. So the how to draws and how to renders are basically this part. In New Masters Academy, they have a little bit more on the aesthetic side with instructors such as like Bill Perkins and so on, but they have a lot of foundation, perspective, form with Eric Olsen, as I mentioned on my videos on perspective, as well as Steve Houston, the figure, anatomy, construction, function, and so on. Even the movement side, I wanted to add here this picture. This is a painting by Jericho when we didn't understand how a horse ran. So once we had photography, we were able to understand which legs are in which position at what time. And then this changes a lot. So it's understanding the structure of movement that tells a lot of how we're conveying that. But we can do this in a more fantastical way if we want to do it. So if you look at Mary Poppins, they use this kind of way, the carousel mentality. And it's interesting for that moment, but that's not a horse movement. That's not a horse race depiction. So a lot of structure in here. Then we jump into aesthetics. Aesthetics is basically manipulating everything that you've seen. So I talked about this both on the figure drawing and gesture to all the way to design, as well as the composition video I did. I'll add links here. I love this piece by T.B. Choi. I've talked about it in this video as well. So this is where the understanding of what you're seeing, the structure, you can distort it for stylization. This is aesthetics. It's copying other people to learn how they stylize, what they change. And this is a masterclass on it because you have the same drawing, the same figure in different styles. So you can see all the little changes that you do in shapes, in proportions to get different styles. So study this. Her book is awesome. I'll have links to all of that. There are lots of books on composition. I've talked about this here as well. And the creative process from James Gurney, Dream Worlds and Vision by Hans Bacher. So using all of this to tell a story. So understanding and absorbing different aesthetics, this is where you will learn, and it will take a long time to understand who you are, what you love. This is the influences, this is the copies that you're going to make, the styles you're going to be learning in all of those pillars, as we talked about before. Brainstorm and Schoolism are great resources. I love that Nathan Fawkes from Schoolism, on his courses, he talks about Mondrian, Piet Mondrian. And it's very interesting to see the change that this artist went through from more figurative landscape painting, the trees, and then turning the trees into more abstract. So going into this aesthetic side and focusing more on composition, shapes, edges, than on the literal structure. So you're taking out the structure aspect, still using a lot of your techniques, your medium, and so on, especially like for this kind of lines and very exact lines. And you start really abstracting all of that into just good aesthetic, good taste, how to organize simple like squares and rectangles to convey something that looks good. A lot of the abstract painters that came from a more figurative landscape painting way, you can see the change, or even Picasso and other like Cubism, Expressionists, you see this abandonment of the structure and the logic going into more aesthetic side. You see that change also in Gustav Klimt, going more to the 2D aspects. It tells a lot about you. It's this expression part that I talked about. So if we come back to the creative aspect, it's what you want to convey. So it's not like only copying photos. I've talked a lot about this on this video. Using the hands of Sargent, how you convey personality in something that is simple. A lot of people are really concerned about drawing hands right from a structure standpoint, but they are not thinking what kind of messages they are conveying with that. Even if they distort the hands a little bit, if you look at a Gustav Klimt or a Egon Schiele drawing, they're distorting everything, but they're communicating so much. This is where you will stand out when you start finding what you like, combining it, and expressing yourself. Maxfield Parrish, the use of color in this painting, and all his paintings, the use of color is the expression. The design, I have Evan Amundsen as well as Alexandria Neonakis here. The changes in the backstory that they're going to do to convey the message that they want with that specific character. Or even as simple as Sargent painting a portrait. It needs to be that person that you're painting. You're being paid because of that, but you want to convey something different. You want to simplify the cloth. So you guide the eye, you convey the fabric, the softness, and all that's expression. That's how you're seeing the world and how you can want to communicate it. Mike Azevedo here, I love how he changes the aesthetic in different materials, both from a structure, really deep understanding of what materials look like and having your references there, but controlling your values, especially in this part here that is in shadows, that things are not competing. So you're not over rendering the metal in here to compete with the face. You need to have this kind of composition flow to go to the face of the painting and then jump around and find all the other very nice things that you have to see there. Karla Ortiz here, the control of edges, the control of values, the grouping of values here in the owls, as well as the hair, the contrast between the hair and the fabric. We talked a lot about that in my video on Mead Schaefer, controlling edges, using that as simply as a figure in front of almost one color background. Blaise here drawing for Disney. So the importance of having the structure, the life drawing, understanding the gestures so you can stylize it later on to fit the overall art direction of the project that you're working on. This comes from design, this comes from storytelling, the expression on the gesture and the movement and the animation using all the principles that we talked about in the aesthetic aspects. And last but not least, this video is awesome. It's an interview with Iain McCaig, but also now he talks about the same concept in his new course at Schoolism. That is the soul sketchbook. If you take a sketchbook, do a page a day, adding something that moves you. It could be something that is scary to you. So for me, I'm arachnophobic. So I can draw spiders in there that are going to move me. It can be something that I'm passionate about. There is even his book on his sketchbook. So I'll have a link in the description as well. I want to buy that one. I don't have it yet, but I will. I want to see his world, and he also tells a story in that way. So it's awesome. And you do that once a day for 3 to 6 months without looking back at the other drawings. And then in the end of all of that, you go through it one page at a time, like really digesting everything and having that picture of your soul, of what you are passionate about. I tried doing a little bit of that, looking back to my whole career. I've talked about this a little bit in my art as a hobby discussion, as well as other discussions that I want to have here, looking really deep into my previous work. But I really want to go through this process as well of doing my soul sketchbook. I would love to hear if any of you went through this experience. And finally, going back to what we discussed before, I think this is not a linear thing. You learn your craft and your technique, and then your structure, and then your aesthetics, and then you get creative. I think it needs to start with creative. Either it's your soul sketchbook, so you can understand what you're passionate about, even if it's the worlds that you have in your head that you want to bring out, the stories you want to tell. Iain McCaig is a great storyteller. He wants to tell stories. So everything revolves around this last piece, how you want to convey, how you see the world, and so on. And for that, you need a lot of different tools. You will need your technique. You will need your materials. You will need the media, the software, and so on. You will need to understand more of logic, your anatomy, if you want to place figures, proportions, structure, form, values, lights. And then how can you change all of that and make your stylization, either with a limited palette, if you're under Zorn using 4 different colors, or the gamut mapping from James Gurney, or you're changing everything upside down and painting completely different and trying to express yourself. If you're using high key painting, low key painting, contrasts, how you want to do that, the composition, and so on. This is a lifelong effort that revolves around your communication. A lot of people tend to stay too long, from my experience, in this part, like structure and a little bit of the aesthetic, and especially like softwares, not too much of the memory drawing. I haven't touched a lot of this. I want to come back to this, talking about applying these pillars into drawing more specifically, so we can see a lot of different examples. But memory drawing is a big one that will really impact how you create later on. And we normally don't focus too much on that, but we tend to stay a lot of time in this area, a little bit of time in here, learning your rules of third and composition and so on, not as much about edges and not going deep into principles of animation and so on. And just forget this last part until we really need it, either because we're looking for a job or we have burned out and we really need to understand how to turn that around. So what about you? What areas of this have you been neglecting? What are you focusing on? I would love to hear your experiences, and other people will definitely benefit from that. So please share in the comments below, and we can make this more of a conversation. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll definitely catch up in other videos soon. Yeah, bye.